I like that Isaiah reading. It keeps before us the promise of God. And receiving the promises of God are always what our gatherings are about, aren't they? To, one more time, listen a little more deeply, to receive the grace and understand that it belongs to us. Somebody just snuck in the door, took one look at me and walked the other way. Okay, I was supposed to be wearing a summer Hawaiian shirt this morning. Because the last time that I was here, it was in last fall, he was wearing this absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous shirt. And I said to him, when you get tired of wearing that, could you give it to me? After worship that morning, he went into the restroom, came out in just a t-shirt, and he handed me the shirt. Now, I've heard about people all my life, but he is so good, he'd give you this shirt off his back. But so far, it's the only time that it's happened. Now, I had promised that I was going to be wearing that shirt this morning. And the grandchildren came in this week, and it's been just such a bedlam, I just couldn't do it. However, if you don't cancel the engagement that you have in store for me 2 weeks from today, I will wear it then. Because any gift that's given to you ought to be celebrated by the whole people of God. And there. And now, before I read the gospel, and incidentally, if you're going to open up your bulletins and read along with me from there, you're not going to recognize it, because I'm going to be using Peterson's The Message this morning. Not because it's better, but I like it. But what we need to remember about this is going to be from the 13th chapter of Matthew. But what's happened in the preceding chapters, all the way back in chapter 9, there was that time when Jesus was attending to the needs of the people who had gathered, and he looked up and he said, "My land, there's more work here than I can do all by myself. Let's pray for more laborers for the harvest." And so Jesus and the disciples prayed, and you've heard the thing, be careful what you pray for, you just might get it. Because as soon as they stopped praying, he said to the disciples, "You're in. Go get them." Not that they were ready for it. But what happened in the sections after that? On the one hand, these people kept emerging. They wanted to see Jesus. They wanted to meet Jesus. They wanted to listen to what he had to say. And at the same time, the religious leaders of the day began to become a little more apprehensive. And they started resisting. Hey, the disciples plucked a few grains off the wheat one Saturday morning, and they said, "What are they doing? Tell them to stop. It's the Sabbath. They can't do that." As if it was Jesus' fault that the disciples were hungry. And beginning with then, we begin to see more and more resistance to what it is that Jesus has to say. And with that in mind then, we finally, in chapter 13, come to this following reading. At about that time, Jesus left the house and sat on the beach. In no time at all, a crowd gathered along the shoreline, forcing him into a boat. And using the boat as a pulpit, he addressed the congregation telling stories. What do you make of this? A farmer planted seed. As he scattered the seed, some of it fell on the road, and birds ate it. Some fell in the gravel. It sprouted quickly, but didn't put down roots. So when the sun came up, it withered just as quickly. Some fell in the weeds. As it came up, it was strangled by the weeds. Some fell on good earth and produced a harvest beyond his wildest dreams. Are you listening to this? Really listening? I'm going to extend a little further. The disciples came up and asked, "Why do you tell stories?" And he replied, "You've been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works. Not everybody has this gift, this insight. It hasn't been given to them. Whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understandings flow freely. But if there's no readiness, any trace of receptivity, it soon disappears. That's why I tell stories, to create readiness, to nudge people toward receptive insight." And there ends our reading, at least for right now. I love where the reading begins. How many of you spent time on the seashore? Do you remember what that was like the first day? You walk out and you feel that air coming off the ocean. And you breathe deeply. And you sigh. And if you're there for a while, what you begin to notice is all the leftover cares from the day before begin to just dissipate and float away. There's something about being next to the water like that that's peace-producing. It's such a gift. And in my head, I can see Jesus, after the flack he's been getting from the scribes and the Pharisees, after the resistance on the one hand and the demands of the people on the other hand, why, he's just exhausted and has to get out from under the weight of it. I had a friend one time who made this distinction. You know what depression is? Depression is when the stuff of life is on the inside and grips you and pulls you down. You know what oppression is? Oppression is when the weight of the world is outside you and pushes you down. It's easy to imagine that Jesus, having come to bring light and finding out there was so much darkness, felt a kind of depression and inability to be able to cope with it all. And then that he got the outside interference from the scribes and the Pharisees and the religious leaders pushing down from the outside. Boy, did he need time by the seaside. And what happens? He barely has a chance to sigh when the crowds start gathering again. Give us more. I have an aunt who needs your help. Oh, please, mend my woundedness. Touch me, Jesus. Please, just touch me. And those kinds of things, and they began multiplying. So all of a sudden there wasn't even room for Jesus on the beach. And apparently he was so close to the shore that he couldn't see where the rocks were, so he could just walk out across the water. So he got into a boat. And there in the boat, he tells the story. Now, one of the interesting things I was reminded of as I was reading about that first century farmer who went out to cast his seed, is that he threw the seed out before he plowed the ground. How about that? So that when he plowed the ground, he already knew where the good ground was, and he could just turn the soil and it would be covering the seeds, and then they would sprout and produce the harvest. But in doing that, what do you know? Some of the seed fell in places where he was not going to plow. And the story tells of what happened. There is a concept in the Old Testament called understanding. And what understanding means in the Old Testament is not just do we intellectually understand, but when we intellectually understand and it makes such a personal connection to us that it claims us. It grabs hold of us, and having done that, it will not let us go. Now that's what happens with the news when it lands on the good soil. It's not just intellectually understood, it is emotionally and spiritually embraced. That word is for me. It's mine. Hot dog. It makes such a difference in my life to know that God knows my name. That's a relief. I always thought God just called me boy. Another generic male. But no, he said, hey Chuck, explain why you're not wearing that shirt that you promised you'd wear today. Hey, Chuck, remember you're going to have grandchildren you're going to be playing with this afternoon. So don't make these people stay here so long that you're late to get together with your grandchildren. God knows my name, just as He knows yours. He knows where we are in our lives and what we need. And that's the stuff, that's the seeds of the kingdom. And we take those seeds and we internalize them and plow them so they're under the covers and they sprout. And they possess us and we claim them for ourselves. Why do you tell stories, Jesus? Because there are some folks that need a little help in understanding what's going on. They find it too easy to get lost with their cell phones. They find it too easy to hear the demands of the boss, the trials of the day, to get caught up in stuff they kind of like to do if they had time for it. And all of a sudden, those seeds diminish in importance to them. And they move in another direction. Sometimes it's the person that, you don't really want to go to church today, do you? Why don't you come with me? We'll go to a movie. There's all that stuff that's competing. And you and I are the ones, because we're here, we're being reminded that it's our job to recognize how precious this is, how much it belongs to us, how much it claims us, how much it's a vehicle by which our God can whisper, psst, you're mine. Breathe deep. That's my spirit that's entering your heart. I love you. So glad you're here today. And if you've heard that, then it's time to say thanks be to God.